Another day, another recap. Today I have put together a movie franchise recap of the Kingsman movies. This includes Kingsman: The Secret Service, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, and lastly The King's Man. This action-packed trilogy will not disappoint you, so without further ado, sit back, relax, and I know you'll love this one. In 1997, a helicopter lands in a Middle Eastern compound where they capture an extremist leader. Harry interrogates him, but the man reveals a pin in his mouth and Lee shields the others from the ensuing explosion, sacrificing himself. Harry, along with his other partners Merlin and Lancelot, acknowledge Lee's bravery. Lancelot is then officially promoted and is a part of the Kingsmen. The next scene shows Harry visiting Lee's widow Michelle. He brings the news of Lee's death and offers her a Medal of Valor with a special number on the back. Harry explains that if Michelle ever needs help she can use this number and say, "Oxford's not brogues," to identify herself. She rejects the medal, and so Harry turns to Lee's young son Gary, known as Eggsy. He gives him the medal, hoping it might be of use to him in the future. 17 years later in Argentina, Professor Arnold seems to have been taken hostage by a group of thugs that are awaiting their boss. Someone knocks on the door, and when the man opens it, he discovers Lancelot there. Lancelot quickly takes out the first man and uses his body as a shield to kill the rest of the men present, even showing off both his jiu-jitsu moves and his perfect timing. A knock is then heard on the door, and as Lancelot approaches, he is quite literally sliced in half by a woman with bladed prosthetic legs named Gazelle. She covers the corpses and opens the door for her boss Valentine. He laughs as he walks in and tells the professor he cannot handle even one dot of blood. He actually apologizes for the mess and tells the professor they are both going to be good friends. In London, Harry arrives at a tailor shop, and we see it is actually just a front for the Kingsman headquarters. Arthur sits at the head of the table, and they all use special glasses to have a virtual meeting with each other, to which Arthur wants a replacement for the loss of their dear friend. Merlin then walks in and says the people responsible for their loss is related to horrific stories in both Uganda and Chechnya. The last message Lancelot said was that Professor Arnold was kidnapped, which begs the question as to why he was seen on his campus that day. Harry bids Arthur farewell as he looks for a candidate of his own to be nominated as a possible Kingsman agent. Elsewhere, Eggsy is all grown up and in his early 20s. He lives in a small rundown apartment with his mother Michelle and her new husband Dean. There is some nice beef between the two men, but Eggsy walks towards his baby sister Daisy. With that, he heads out for drinks with his mates. Problematically, Dean's group of thugs led by Rottweiler tells Eggsy to beat it. He obliges until he walks outside to reveal he stole some car keys. They get in the car and Rottweiler hears it on outside and gets up to see that Eggsy is ripping some mad donuts in it. He then takes off as Rottweiler calls Dean to alert him, but stops halfway as Eggsy puts on a cop chase. He drives in reverse for quite some bit and shows off his excellent driving skills until he eventually smacks it. He tells his mates to get out of the car and rams right into the cop car. And as you'd expect, Eggsy ends up at the cop shop where a detective tries getting him to snitch on his friends. But he remains silent, even at the prospect of jail time. He then pulls out the medal he received as a child and dials the numbers in the back, and when a woman answers he says the phrase, but the lady ends the call. The detective outside is then called by his higher-ups, and guess who was just released. As Eggsy walks out, he discovers Harry waiting for him and also offering him a ride. They head out for some drinks where Eggsy tries to understand how his father died and learned that his father saved Harry's life. Harry then speaks on how Eggsy dropped out from school, dropped out of the military, and has been involved in petty crime. Just then, Dean's boys arrive, and they tell Harry to beat it and call him a grandpa. He makes his way out, but instead begins locking the door, saying the quote, "Manners maketh man." The 6 goons trip out, but Harry gets to the beating. Eggsy is astonished, and the men all converge on Harry, who quite easily takes the lot of them out without exerting much energy or let alone breaking a sweat. Whether they use knives or even guns, they do not stand a chance. Harry then shoots an amnesia dart on the bartender, and when he aims it at Eggsy, he swears on all he knows he will not tell a soul, and Harry is happy to hear it. He pats Eggsy on the back and tells him it was a pleasure before walking out. On the news, Valentine speaks about a movie based on his life. Eggsy then gets home and Dean cracks him, then shoves Michelle out of the way. He keeps on hitting Eggsy and wants to know who the old man was, but Eggsy says he was alone. Through a speaker hidden on Eggsy's back, Harry listens in, and when it escalates, Harry speaks through the microphone and threatens to put Dean away for life. Eggsy escapes only to find more goons outside, and here comes some parkour. And wow, does he have some tricks on his hands. He heads to the tailor shop where Harry was awaiting his arrival. Harry takes Eggsy to the back room, and as they enter, Harry asks if Eggsy would like to change his life around and become a Kingsman. Eggsy agrees, and the room heads downwards as Harry mentions that the Kingsman is an independent international intelligence agency with the highest level of discretion. The duo board a bullet train and shoot through the city until they reach a massive property. Eggsy then looks at the proper base of operations, and Merlin points out where he will be sleeping. Inside the room are 8 other cadets, and Merlin tells them all this is the most dangerous job interview in the world and only one of them will be the next Lancelot. As he leaves, Roxy introduces herself. Another 4 cadets do the same, and they are Charlie, Digby, Rufus, and lastly Amelia. It is immediately clear that Eggsy is way out of place compared to the poshy upper-class vibe the other cadets are giving. Valentine, in the meantime, wants to know who his intruder was. He also complains that his billions of dollars spent on climate change was useless and wants to do something proper about it. Turns out he's in the White House speaking to the president. Back with the cadets, all get ready to sleep at night when suddenly water rises and wakes them all up. Within seconds they are completely submerged and Eggsy tries the door as the others create breathing masks. Eggsy swims back and goes to the mirror. He starts punching it with Merlin behind it, then boom. Merlin tells Eggsy that was smart thinking, but they all failed the first test as they left their man behind to die. Everyone is starstruck as they realize this isn't a joke. Professor Arnold in the meantime goes to work until he encounters Harry, who wants to know why his captors freed him. But the professor screams and suddenly implodes. 2 men come in and Harry exits through a window leaving some damage to the campus. Valentine is happy that his security measures work, but he wants to know who these men are and decides to bring the deadline on his project forward. While this happens, Merlin tells the cadets they all need to adopt a puppy that will remain with them until they finish. Harry, though, has been put in a coma, and Eggsy walks in asking if he's okay. Merlin tells him to focus on his training, and that's exactly what he does, but his puppy doesn't want to. Valentine watches his machines make chips while Harry finally awakens from his coma. The cadets continue their training, whether it be through books or through guns. At Valentine's, he is having dinner with the Scandinavian princess. She calls his plan insane, and he tells her that she's not going back home. The Prime Minister, on the other hand, loves the idea. The princess's detail then attempts to save her, but they stand no chance. The Prime Minister gets an implant behind his ear, and Valentine welcomes him to the project. Harry is back to shape and congratulates Eggsy on making it to the top 6. Merlin approaches and shows the duo a video of how the professor died from an implant that was created by Valentine. Eggsy tells them about the announcement today, and it turns out Valentine is offering the world his free SIM card with unlimited everything forever. Harry wants to pay him a visit, and Merlin begins creating a high-profile alias in order to be kidnapped just like the princess. The following day, the remaining cadets have their task: land on a target without radar detection to pass, and whoever fails goes home. The green light goes, and as they all jump out, Roxy gets scared, but she eventually decides to follow Eggsy down. The team are all near each other and are having a blast until Merlin laughs and says one of them does not have a parachute. Eggsy tells everyone to pair up, but some of them decide to fail the test rather than risk death. Another one of them buckles, and just before the no radar detection, one more opens their parachute and Charlie goes straight after him. Only Eggsy and Roxy remain, and as they pass the non-radar detection point, Merlin holds tight as Eggsy engages Roxy's parachute and they both land on the target. Merlin dismisses 3 candidates and allows Charlie and the duo to continue, but Eggsy tells Merlin why he only sabotaged his parachute. Merlin pulls Eggsy's plug and a parachute deploys. Seems it was all a psychological trick. That night, Harry attends Valentine's gala, and it turns out Valentine cancelled the entire gala from how much money Harry had donated him. Gazelle walks in the room with the food and the two prepare themselves for some McDonald's. Harry speaks to Valentine about climate change and then mentions Professor Arnold. Valentine asks him if he likes spy movies, and the two make jokes as they both know who they are. After dinner, Valentine thanks him for coming, then tells Gazelle he planted a nano-tracking device in Harry's drink. But Harry also got information that Valentine is in connection with a church group. Valentine, though, speaks to the Scandinavian princess who refuses to agree to his terms. Seems there's hundreds of celebrities and dignitaries that are being locked up under his care. Other news shows how thousands around the globe have queued to collect the free Sims. Merlin hands the final 3 candidates pictures of their targets they need to win over. As they do so, the girl gets up to speak on the phone, and it seems the others had something in their drinks, and they all pass out. Eggsy awakens tied up on train tracks as a train approaches. The man wants to know what the Kingsman is. Eggsy remains silent, and the train runs past him. He opens his eyes to see it was all a test and he passed. Charlie is up next, and as you can guess, he fails horrifically. Valentine, in the meantime, finishes setting up a biometric lock and gets to the testing phase of his project. While this happens, Eggsy is taken shopping. Harry wants to give him a bulletproof gentleman's suit, but he takes him to fitting room 3, a massive armory of weapons which includes shoes that are weapons, umbrella weapons, and even pistol shotguns. And let's not forget poison pens or taser rings. But as the duo exits, they find Valentine buying a suit of his own. He and Harry talk sarcastically with each other until Valentine leaves. But Harry placed a hidden speaker on Valentine, and Arthur wants to speak with Eggsy. He hands him a gun and says to shoot his dog, as Merlin does the same to Roxy. Eggsy aims the gun, but he doesn't want John Wick coming back from the dead to come after him, so he stops. A shot is heard from Roxy's gun and Eggsy hands Arthur the pistol. Arthur tells him to beat it and to go home. Eggsy jumps in a cab outside and Roxy is officially named Lancelot. Back at home, Eggsy is quite bummed to go back to his normal life. His mother gives him a big hug, but he discovers a black eye and he is not going to tolerate it any longer. He heads straight to Dean and wants to have a one-on-one, and Dean tells his men to go inside. But the cab he was driving suddenly takes off on its own and takes him to Harry's house. There, Harry scolds him for not pulling the trigger and tells him that it was a blank and he would not have failed. Everyone that died during the trials were all fake and everyone is just fine. Merlin contacts Harry and they listen in on Valentine say that the entire world is completed, and if the church trial goes well, they will initiate launch. Harry tells Eggsy to stay put and he heads to Kentucky. At the church, Harry attends a sermon where the pastor yells and shouts at his hatred for the American government. 1,000 feet away, Valentine says he hopes enough of these freaks have his SIM card and he initiates launch. A woman yells at Harry and he takes out his gun and kills her. He starts unloading every bullet he has, and Valentine takes off as Eggsy cannot believe it. Everyone at the church fires, hits and do whatever they can to harm anyone. But bro does Harry go crazy. Merlin cannot stop him, and Valentine is happy his sims are working this well. Valentine wants Harry dead, but Harry is no easy kill and keeps on killing and even lets off a grenade. Harry is literally the last man standing and everyone around him is dead. Eggsy is shocked and so is Merlin. Harry walks outside to see 2 guns aimed at him. Valentine explains his sims causes a wave that triggers aggression and turns off inhibitors. Valentine then talks about spy movies and how the spy escapes and with the knowledge they have comes back and win. But not this time. Everyone cannot believe that Harry just died and Valentine is quite irritated and initiates the clock. Merlin is taking this quite hard, and Eggsy is still at Harry's house and is very upset. He hears Harry still speaking to him and goes to the tailor shop to speak to Arthur. Arthur tells Eggsy they have Valentine's confession and the proper authorities will handle it from here on out. Arthur tells Eggsy to sit down and goes to pour him a drink until Eggsy sees the same incision behind Arthur's ear. He then distracts Arthur and they both have a drink. Arthur then pulls out the pen and says he poisoned Eggsy and is now in leagues with Valentine. He explains that the world is like a body in which the body's temperature rises to kill a virus and the world's temperature is rising to kill its virus, the humans. Arthur invites Eggsy to the New World Order but he refuses and Arthur activates the poison. It affects himself though, and it seems Eggsy switched the cups and Arthur drops dead. Eggsy gets the pen and rips out the microchip and V-Day starts in 6 hours. Merlin is told what just happened, and he says that the 3 of them will conduct the mission on their own. They jump in a private plane, and Merlin explains to them the plan is to break one of Valentine's satellites which should buy them the time needed to hack into the mainframe, and Merlin can shut it down. At the so-called safe house, Valentine has a perfect defense system in place. Roxy puts on her halo suit and once she is in the atmosphere, she needs to fire the missile as the balloons pop, the plane takes off and Eggsy will use Arthur's invitation. Valentine then gives a motivational speech, saying they should honor the people's death today by celebrating. Today is a historic day and pretty much tells everyone there they are the chosen people. Eggsy puts on his custom-made suit Harry had made for him and is ready to go. As they approach the base, they receive permission to land and they immediately see the danger. Merlin lands the plane and Eggsy exits and hands the woman Arthur's ticket, which she accepts. After scanning him, he is escorted into the main hall and the plane is taken to a lower level. With only 18 minutes to go, he needs to get to the control room and Roxy is almost about to fire the missile away. Eggsy then knocks out the Scandinavian Prime Minister and jumps on his laptop and gets Merlin inside the system. One of Roxy's balloons pops before she shoots the missile, and Charlie appears and holds Eggsy at knife point and calls out to Valentine but then receives an electric shock. Roxy shoots the missile away and her other balloon pops. Valentine changes the countdown to only 2 minutes away, and Merlin gets the plane ready while directing Eggsy on where to go. Roxy drops herself down to the ground and now there's only 1 minute left. Eggsy shoots at will as he heads to the plane and shows off some acrobatics. With only 5 seconds to go, the missile hits the satellite which stops the countdown. Roxy gets back safely and Merlin discovers the biometric lock and immediately runs outside to save Eggsy from getting killed. Merlin says he needs to make sure Valentine's hands doesn't touch his computer and gives Eggsy a sweet amount of guns to choose from, but he grabs an umbrella and Valentine decides to call his friend with a nearby satellite, asking if he could piggyback off it. Merlin sees this and alerts Eggsy to this and the army approaching him. Eggsy gets to work and takes out the first bunch of enemies, but a sniper rifle causes him to throw a grenade and continue through the base. Problematically though, they corner him and have men on both sides. Merlin has his own problems though. So Eggsy tells Roxy to call his mother and tell her to hide herself. Eggsy then gets an idea and tells Merlin to activate the soldier's chips. Merlin jumps on the system and begins hacking it, and Valentine is having a heart attack as he cannot stop it. Then boom, all the guards trying to kill Merlin die. All the guards trying to kill Eggsy die. All those snobs who ran off and left the world to die all die in a beautiful display of fireworks. Valentine then jumps on the speakers and says he didn't put a chip in his head, and all those died for no reason as they cannot even stop him. Roxy tells Michelle to lock her baby in the bathroom and throw away the key. Then Valentine activates it. All the phones around the world begin turning on. London is an absolute mess with hundreds killing each other and Michelle trying to get to her baby as well. Eggsy walks towards the control room and fires, which stops the Sims from activating. Gazelle says she'll handle him and jumps out the window and shoots. The two get into a fight with each other and Valentine starts the killing again. Football fields are death zones, and as the music blares, the two still fight with each other in a very weird way. But Eggsy decides enough is enough. People are dying by the thousands and Eggsy uses whatever he can to kill his opponent. Eventually, they both jump in the air and Eggsy activates his shoes and cuts Gazelle. This lethal poison quickly spreads and is enough to make her drop dead. The world is in havoc though, and Merlin tells Eggsy to kill Valentine, and so he uses the leg prosthetic of Gazelle as a javelin and stops the killing around the world. Valentine vomits at the sight of his blood and drops. Roxy cheers and so does Merlin. Michelle cradles her baby and Merlin tells Eggsy that Harry would be proud of him. Seems Valentine is still alive and talking about spy movies. But as Valentine said to Harry, Eggsy says the same to him and says this isn't a movie, it's finally over, and Eggsy heads to the plane to celebrate. Some while later Dean is with Michelle and Eggsy appears. He tells his mother his new job comes with a new house and she goes to leave, but Dean stops her. And just like Harry, Eggsy walks towards the door and locks it while saying manners maketh man. He makes Dean drop to the ground and that's the end of the first movie. The second movie begins with Eggsy, also known as Galahad, exiting the Kingsman when he is suddenly confronted by Charlie, the former Kingsman trainee who's turned his back on the agency. With a gun trained on Eggsy, Eggsy throws Charlie into a taxi and Charlie's thugs chase them. Inside the cab, Charlie's mechanical arm grapples with Eggsy, who tries to stab him with a poison blade, but it ends up with the driver, which kills him. In the chaos, Eggsy manages to crash the taxi, ejecting Charlie through the windshield and severing his mechanical arm in the process. With help from Merlin, he commandeers the taxi to escape Charlie's thugs. He speeds to Hyde Park where he dispatches the goons with missiles just in time to elude the approaching police. With no time to lose, he plunges the car into a lake that leads to the sewers. Needing to reach a dinner immediately, Merlin points him to a quick and unsavory exit through the sewers and he does so. Meanwhile, Charlie's detached arm, still functional, hacks the taxi's computer, extracting classified information on every Kingsman agent. After his unpleasant sewer escape, Eggsy reunites with his new partner, Princess Tilda. His friends are also there to celebrate Brandon's birthday celebration. Eggsy asks his friends to dog-sit his pet, and Brandon offers to help. The scene shifts to a 1950s-style place in the Cambodian jungle known as Poppyland. It's a front for a lucrative drug enterprise led by Poppy Adams, an American billionaire and kingpin. Her business thrives in the shadows, concealing narcotics within common recreational drugs. Poppy confronts two of her men, Charles and Angel, at her diner. When she exposes Charles's betrayal, she sets her robotic dogs on him and compels Angel to grind him into burger meat. To complete his initiation, Angel undergoes a makeover, erasing his fingerprints and receiving a gold tattoo, a mark of Poppy's enterprise. He's then served a burger made from Charles, which he eats under pressure as well as fearing Poppy's wrath. Back in London, Eggsy talks with the new Arthur and fellow Kingsmen, including Roxy, as they update the team about on why Charlie received his new arm. Seems after Eggsy tasered him, he lost quite a few pieces of himself. They also note that Charlie's tattoo is a clue tying him to Poppy's criminal network named the Golden Circle. That evening, Eggsy attends a dinner with Tilda and her parents, the King and Queen of Sweden. Initially, the king is cold towards him, but he eventually warms up to the king as he impresses him with precise answers to his questions, all thanks to Roxy discreetly feeding him information through his glasses. Eggsy silently thanks Roxy, acknowledging her as the best at what she does. Meanwhile, Brandon visits Eggsy's house to look after his dog, JB. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he starts tampering with the collection of gadgets. Unwittingly, he connects to Eggsy's glasses and he activates the hand grenade, and Eggsy yells to turn it off, causing a scene at the dinner with the king. But now comes the real tragedy. A missile strike lands on Eggsy's house and it is quickly followed by one at the Kingsman headquarters. Brandon, JB, Roxy, Arthur and all Kingsman agents in other locations are killed in the blasts. It seems Poppy is behind the deadly attacks, and in celebration she rewards Charlie with a new advanced mechanical arm. Eggsy, in shock, rushes to the remains of the Kingsman headquarters, where he encounters Merlin. Initially, they suspect each other of the attacks due to their survival, but they quickly deduce their mutual innocence. Together, they locate a vault meant to initiate the Doomsday Protocol. Inside, they find only a bottle of whiskey, which they drink in honor of their fallen comrades. Upon finishing the bottle, Eggsy notices a label indicating it was distilled in Kentucky, marked with the Kingsman logo. They deduce their next move to Kentucky, USA. Once there, they locate a distillery. The duo breaks in and searches the place until a man approaches. He goes by the name Agent Tequila and mistakenly believes the duo is his enemy. They say they are a part of the Kingsmen and had received an invitation, but he does not believe it for a second. He wants answers, and the three get into a fight with one another. But Tequila is no easy opponent, and he quickly takes out the duo with little to no effort. They both wake up soon enough and find Agent Tequila standing over them, and funnily enough giving them a lecture on how to treat rum. Despite their insistence that they are Kingsmen, Tequila remains skeptical and goes to burn them alight. They stick to their story, and so he unveils the room behind to reveal Harry is alive and well. He threatens to shoot him, and just before he presses the trigger, Ginger Ale runs in and confirms both their identities. Tequila then welcomes the two with open arms and unties the duo. They immediately rush to Harry but are stunned to discover he doesn't know them and thinks he studies butterflies for a living. The duo, clearly confused, head to Ginger for some answers. She says 1 year ago she detected an anomaly at the church Harry was shot at. Once she landed, they found Harry nearly dead. With the help of a miraculous device called Alpha Gel and tiny machines known as nanomites, they incredibly saved Harry's life but problematically couldn't restore his memories. Eggsy and Merlin are then introduced to the Statesman headquarters. Inside they meet Champagne, also known as Champ, the leader of the organization. He gives the Kingsmen billions at their disposal and learns of everything that happened from Eggsy. Eggsy also mentions they have a lead with Charlie's old acquaintance Clara, who is in touch with him as expected to be at the music festival. Tequila's face then suddenly starts showing some blue lines, which looks quite weird, and he is sent to the med bay, but not before handing Eggsy his glasses. Eggsy is introduced to Agent Whiskey, who says his jet is coming to pick him up. Within the confines of Poppyland, Elton John is kept prisoner by Poppy, who compels him to play music for her entertainment. Spotting a blue rash on his face, Poppy deduces he's been sampling her stash. Elton later admits this, as well as doing it with Angel. Poppy then unleashes her robotic dogs on Angel, tearing him apart. The dogs then rush towards Elton, but they are programmed to recognize him as a friend and leave him alone. Back at the Statesman headquarters, Merlin and Ginger are working to reverse Harry's amnesia. They try to jog his memory by recreating the traumatic moment from Kingsman training by flooding his room with water. However, Harry is overwhelmed by fear and they abort the experiment, draining the room before it can cause him any harm. Merlin then walks in and explains to Harry that he has bad amnesia, and when he was a kid he joined the army and ended up at the Kingsmen. Harry then asks to go home, and Ginger agrees with him. Back in England, Eggsy tells Tilda he's going on a mission, but before he leaves it seems there's a new dog in the family. With that, Eggsy jumps in Whiskey's car and their mission begins. Their goal is to locate Clara and deploy a tracking device on her. Whiskey attempts to charm Clara but doesn't succeed. Eggsy then takes the lead and they end up at Clara's tent, and that's when Eggsy decides to call Tilda, and wow does she get real upset really quickly. But Eggsy plants the tracker and leaves the tent. He tries calling back Tilda but she doesn't want to speak to him. Back at headquarters, both Merlin and Ginger try to find out the cause of the blue marks, but the only correlation there is that they are all using Poppy's new supply. In the meantime, Eggsy visits Harry and discovers that he is packing and ready to go. Seems he's quite excited to study butterflies in the real world, and Eggsy tells him all their stories they had together and tells him not to give up, but that old Harry seems to be dead. Eggsy decides to drown his sorrows and send multiple messages apologizing to Tilda, but then he gets a brilliant idea. He looks at the nearest pet shop and soon enough returns to Harry holding a dog. He wakes him up and says he got him a little leaving present, but then he aims a gun at the dog and Harry runs around the room. Harry then starts tripping out, and soon enough his house comes back to mind. His dog, his training, and how he was shot. He remembers everything and then tells Eggsy it was a blank, and everything comes back to mind. Eggsy gives his old friend a hug, and even Merlin almost sheds a tear at the sight of his dear friend returning. They take him to meet Whiskey and give him a modern-day eye patch. Coincidentally, the men there do not like it and tell him to leave. He walks to the door and once again says the quote, "Manners maketh man." He goes to take out the leader but misses. He is then whacked from his blind side and the fight begins and ends almost immediately. Whiskey is not happy, and he says the quote, "Manners maketh man," and uses his lasso to absolutely obliterate the men there. He then takes out his whip and teaches the men there a lesson in being polite to their guests. Suddenly, a broadcast from Poppy comes across all news stations, and she says to the world she has infiltrated all the common recreational substances. She chillingly demonstrates the progression of her drug's effects on her test subjects, beginning with the blue rash, escalating to uncontrollable mania where the victims dance uncontrollably, then paralysis, and finally a very grim death in 12 hours. However, Poppy reveals she has an antidote which she administers to Elton John, showing how it works. She then issues an ultimatum to the President of the United States, end the war on drugs and grant her and her organization full immunity in exchange for the antidote's release. The world news goes crazy trying to dissect the life of Poppy, but chaos has hit the street, especially in hospitals, and the drug is now titled the dancing disease, as patients dance uncontrollably. The hospitals and clinics are full, and Ginger decides to freeze tequila to save him. The president then speaks with his chief of staff, Miss Fox, and his general, McCoy. He proposes to fake to agree to Poppy's demands so no one panics, but then he can fully eradicate the users and abusers of the world at the same time, cleansing society and also destroying all of Poppy's customers. He tells his general to invoke martial law and cause a press blackout. Champ hears this and is disgusted. Ginger then alerts them that Clara is on the line with Charlie, and Clara explains she has the disease. He tells her to head to a lab in Italy and he'll meet her there. Champ tells them to get the jet ready and go to the meetup. In Italy, Charlie gives the antidote to Clara, and it immediately works. The three agents then walk to a gondola, but they leave Harry to take command of the control room. He takes out the man there with an extinguisher. The other two then arrive at the enemy base and simply walk in. They discover a secret door and find hundreds of workers there. Eggsy walks to the man on point and tries acting like a worker until Charlie spots him. Eggsy rips an antidote and takes off. They need just one to replicate it, and the duo run to the gondola, but Harry is seeing butterflies and eventually closes the door. Charlie then watches the duo and waves at them, and the system is then overridden, and the gondola begins spinning and speeding. Harry cannot do anything, and Charlie chuckles as the gondola spins, until the duo cannot see anymore. But then Whiskey uses his whip to cut a hole in the glass and cut the lines. The gondola goes free-falling and crashes into the snow and breaks an electrical tower which comes at them and just misses. They continue falling down the mountain to some bystanders, and Eggsy uses Whiskey's parachute to slow the fall just enough to not kill anyone. Harry packs up to meet the duo in a small cabin in the woods, but as he opens the door, Whiskey spots enemies and saves the two but breaks the vial in the process. Bullets are then shot rapid fire on the cabin, and they are being surrounded, but Whiskey doesn't care and goes to kill his enemies. Harry tells Eggsy that Whiskey may be working for the other side, but I hope not. 'Cause this man is special, he has skills unseen and unheard of even to the best slingers in the world. An enemy vehicle approaches though, and Whiskey goes back to the cabin as more reinforcements come with Gatling guns this time. Whiskey is out of ammo and tells Harry to give him his gun, but Harry shoots Whiskey dead and the Gatling guns open fire. The duo duck as Eggsy swears at Harry for killing Whiskey. Harry then throws a small device outside which literally turns their enemies into plastic toys. Eggsy continues berating Harry, but Harry says he just saved both their lives and that Whiskey broke the vial on purpose. Eggsy uses the same technology that saved Harry and alerts Merlin and Ginger that he was shot but lies, saying the enemies hit him. Charlie, knowing their base of operations was blown, tells Clara all is forgiven, but then activates a bomb which destroys the base and everyone inside it. The only lead the agency has is a name of someone from Singapore, and Merlin gets to it. They hack the man's email and discover some coordinates sent by Poppy, which leads to Cambodia. Upon returning home, Tilda FaceTimes Eggsy, but problematically she has the blue rash, and during the call she rapidly progresses from the mania stage into becoming paralyzed. Eggsy, desperate and determined, promises to save her. Meanwhile, the president takes drastic measures in response to the crisis. He orders a quarantine for all affected citizens, placing them in containment units, which now includes the chief of staff. Many begin the hit stage 3 and millions will die within hours. The president then gets into a call with Poppy, and a lawyer is told to send the documents to him. Once he countersigns, it becomes an executive decree, and he cannot change it. She also says she has stockpiles worldwide and one access code will distribute them immediately. He laughs so hard when the call ends, and the three remaining Kingsmen head to Poppy's headquarters and her main base of operations. Whiskey, in the meantime, awakens and has forgotten his memories. Ginger shows him a photo of a woman, and his entire life comes back to him, especially how Harry shot him. He gets ready to go to Cambodia, and the trio get ready for the confrontation ahead. Merlin hands something to Eggsy called the Endgame, and Whiskey takes a fighter jet to get to his destination. Eggsy and the other two Kingsmen use a minesweeper to walk through the forest, but problematically Eggsy still steps on a mine. Merlin says he has the answer for it, but strategically kicks Eggsy off and pretty much sacrifices himself. Merlin says Eggsy's father had done the same for him, and he is returning the favor. Eggsy sadly has to depart and leave his friend to die. Harry does the same and the duo approach the base. Merlin begins singing at the top of his lungs, and the guards approach him and are ordered from Poppy to bring him in, but he has other plans. The other guards approach, and sadly enough he steps off the plate and triggers the mine to kill everyone. Now it's Eggsy and Harry's turn. The entire base is alerted to the attack, and our duo run into the base with the umbrella as a shield and then pull off an amazing trick that guns down multiple enemies in sight. A rocket is also fired, and the Kingsmen continue through the base unfazed, even though they are fired from every angle. They use their skills to kill as well as defend with pure awesomeness. They head into Poppy's and Charlie runs off with the case while Harry takes on the dogs. Eggsy gets stuck to a pillar which is broken while Harry's umbrella is ripped apart. Both the Kingsmen are losing, but Eggsy steals the case and runs off. He sprints for it but is caught by Charlie and then pounded to the ground while Harry is in a desperate position also. But when it gets tough, Elton John gets in the puppy's way, which causes the robot to stop. Eggsy is then about to be killed by Charlie until he manages to hack Charlie's arm. Seems that was his plan, and Harry finally manages to kill the robo-pup. Charlie isn't doing so well either, and Eggsy sticks him on a tree as the final dog comes out to play. Charlie drops his arm and Eggsy says he'll make it fair and hides his arm. Charlie still stands no chance though. Eggsy has revenge in his eyes and jumps on top of Charlie and wants the code. When he doesn't have it, Eggsy says this is for all his friends that died at his sinister hands, and he kills him. Harry also manages to take out the final robo-pup as he pours pure gold on it, which causes its mechanics to fail and break. The two then head to Poppy and tell her to put the code in. She refuses to do so, and they inject her with the endgame. Turns out Merlin sped her own substance, and they give Poppy about 8 minutes to live. She quickly begins babbling the code but then suddenly drops to the floor and dies. Seems they got the recipe a little wrong, but Harry doesn't care and puts in the code. However, he stops halfway when Whiskey appears and threatens to kill him. Whiskey also confesses that Harry was right about him, but his agenda is that with no substance users, Statesman's share price will skyrocket. But seems that Whiskey also lost the love of his life, who was pregnant when 2 users caught her in the crossfire of a robbery. He wants them out of this world and to vanish. Suddenly, Eggsy blinds Whiskey and Harry gets out of the rope in time. Now it's time for the final boss. And this is one tough fight, even if it is 2 against 1. After a bit of good old hand-to-hand combat, they go back to using weapons, and Eggsy almost falls into the grinder while Harry fights. They both work together and manage to dunk Whiskey in the grinder, and then quickly releasing the antidote to the world. Millions are saved from this catastrophe, and the field hospitals are being emptied as they are all free from the disease. Tequila also wakes up and the president is arrested as he actively sanctioned the death of millions. Seems Champ has also opened a distillery in Scotland, and the Kingsman is now family with the Statesman. All its resources are at their disposal, and Ginger is then given the position of Agent Whiskey and officially issued in. Some while later, Harry tells Eggsy that he is an honorable man and has fulfilled his potential. Seems Harry is the best man at Eggsy's wedding with Tilda, and everyone celebrates. In our last scene, we witness Agent Tequila dressed in a Kingsman suit, and with that the movie comes to an end. The third movie actually takes us way back in time to 1902 in South Africa. Orlando, the Duke of Oxford, is on a journey accompanied by his wife Emily, their son Conrad, and their bodyguard Shola. They visit a camp to meet with General Kitchener and his assistant Morton. As Orlando and Kitchener are about to engage in a business discussion, a sniper unexpectedly attacks, targeting the soldiers at the camp. Amidst the chaos, Emily rushes to shield Conrad but tragically gets shot. Shola quickly locates and eliminates the enemy sniper. Orlando remains by Emily's side as she succumbs to her injury. In her final moments, she tells him to watch over Conrad, to which he solemnly promises. Conrad, in shock, runs to his mother and Orlando holds him, offering comfort. Fast forward 12 years, Orlando and his son return to their estate. He talks with their nanny Polly, and she tells him that Conrad keeps getting invited to places, but Orlando keeps rejecting them because of the loss of his wife. In the meantime, Conrad is in the middle of combat training under Shola's guidance, but Polly comes out and tells Conrad to clean himself up for his next appointment. Orlando takes his son to none other than the Kingsman tailor shop. Inside, he buys his boy a gentleman's suit. The two also have a heart-to-heart where Orlando explains that nobility and prestige came from being ruthless and tough. Suddenly, they run into Kitchener and Morton, and they ask the tailor to go somewhere private. Kitchener tells Orlando it's time to let his boy out and explore the world. Orlando then comes out of the room and tells his son it's time. Elsewhere, in a concealed location, the notorious figure Grigory Rasputin, known as the Mad Monk, arrives to meet with a group of notorious figures. This meeting includes Gavrilo Princip, Eric Jan Hannesson, and Mata Hari. They are greeted by a secretive man known only as the Shepherd, who is the mastermind leading this gathering. The Shepherd distributes distinct rings to each member, each adorned with a unique animal icon. Rasputin is dissatisfied with receiving a tortoise emblem, and wants to change it. However, the Shepherd, demonstrating his ruthless nature, kills one of his own beloved goats. This act serves as a warning to the group, emphasizing his authority and the seriousness of their undertakings. Following this display of power, the Shepherd dispatches Princip to embark on his mission, setting in motion his plans. During a parade, Conrad joins his father as they accompany Archduke Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. At this moment, Princip makes his move to assassinate the Archduke by throwing a bomb at their car, but Conrad uses an umbrella to deflect the bomb at the car behind. They speed off and quickly make their safe escape. After this, the Archduke addresses the public, making light of the assassination attempt. Orlando expresses regret over bringing Conrad along, which annoys him. Meanwhile, Princip, realizing his initial plan has failed, prepares to dispose of the evidence and takes out some poison. But fate intervenes as he spots the Archduke's car mistakenly heading towards a dead-end street. Seizing this unexpected opportunity, he shoots both Ferdinand and Sophie, resulting in their deaths before he is apprehended and arrested. Orlando immediately takes his son away and is worried as Kitchener speaks on a possible catastrophe from this situation. Orlando then talks of three young cousins always fighting. Their grandmother was Queen Victoria, and they grew up to become Kaiser Wilhelm leading Germany, Tsar Nicholas leading Russia, and King George of England, and the assassination attempt allows the Kaiser to reignite their feud. Orlando is loyal to King George to keep the peace, and the king sends a letter to Kaiser to restrain himself, and his advisor, which is Eric, reminds him of how they used to treat him, especially due to his little hand. The Mad Monk, on the other hand, does the same to Tsar Nicholas and says they gave Serbia their word. With that, Eric and Nicholas both declare war, and King George also says they will be joining to help Russia. And thus World War I begins, a hellhole full of nothing but explosions, bullets, and death of thousands from all sides. After a long and grueling 2 years, Europe's resources have been drained and the Shepherd's plan is working perfectly. He wants Europe to pay for what they had done to his beloved country Scotland, and wants Russia to pull out of the war so Germany can focus on killing England. Conrad in the meantime tells his father he wishes to join the war, and Orlando shuts him up. He tells him that he isn't even old enough to enlist. He mentions how he joined a war when he was young, but it was barbaric and inhumane to kill people that done the same as he did. The Mad Monk in the meantime hides a small amount of poison in a lemon sherbet. Nicholas's son eats this and drops. The Mad Monk says the boy is a symbol of Russia and they must pull out of the war. He then fakes he's using magic and saves the child, making his parents think twice about what he said. Kitchener is alerted to this news and wants to send a squad to Russia, and Conrad asks if he can join, but his father walks in and silences him once again. The general then boards his ship but gets regretful and mourns the loss of countless lives. Suddenly, a nearby submarine fires a missile, destroying Kitchener's ship and killing everyone aboard. Orlando later receives Kitchener's pre-death letter, expressing regret about their last meeting. Orlando, Conrad, Polly, and Shola convene at a secret location, planning to act on their own. Orlando reveals his prison visit to Princip, where he prevented his execution and extracted information about Shepherd's secret society. Their next target is Rasputin the Mad Monk. They are to head to Russia to stop him, and Orlando allows Conrad to accompany them. The team travel to Russia, and the plan is, once they arrive, Conrad will lure the Mad Monk to eat a poisoned Bakewell tart. Knowing he has a sweet tooth, Orlando and Conrad attend a dinner hosted by Rasputin. However, Rasputin finds Conrad uninteresting and turns his attention to Orlando instead. In his chambers, Rasputin claims he can heal Orlando's injured leg. He also decides to eat the poisoned cake. However, nothing happens, and he gestures for Orlando to follow him outside. He takes him to a frozen pool, dipping his leg in, and reveals his awareness of the poison inside the cake. Seems he has built an immunity to poison through daily consumption, and he attempts to drown Orlando. Conrad and Shola rush to his aid. In the ensuing fight, Orlando regains consciousness. Conrad fires a shot, disarming the Mad Monk just as he's about to kill Shola. The Mad Monk then turns to attack Conrad, but Orlando stabs him and manages to drag him into the lake to drown. Surprisingly, the Mad Monk emerges for one final attack, only to be shot in the head by Polly, finally ending his threat. The Shepherd, in the meantime, tells a man named Vladimir Lenin to pick up where the Mad Monk left off. He wants a revolution and wants Russia out of the war. While this happens, we learn that Orlando has broken his vow of pacifism and is quite upset. Polly then walks in with a birthday cake for Conrad. His father joins the table and tells Conrad he has proved himself a man. The two hug it out, but as usual, Conrad says he can now enlist in war, despite his father's word. As he is now 19 years old, Orlando doesn't have a say in the matter. Once they arrive home, Conrad heads to enlist his name, and his father is shattered. In Germany, Eric alerts the Kaiser that they've accidentally sunk another American ship and need to put measures in place. He agrees and the message is passed down the line, but British naval intelligence intercepts this message, and all hands are on deck to crack this code. Orlando even smuggles himself a copy of the code and Polly attempts to break it. While she does this, Conrad is in training. Both he and Polly work vigilantly day in and day out. Polly then receives news from one of their spies which code the Kaiser is using. She cracks it to reveal that the Kaiser has sent a message to propose an alliance with Mexico to attack America, which means that America will join the war on England's side once they see the message. King George is very happy to hear it, and tells Orlando his boy will never fight if that's what he wants. President Wilson is then alerted to the decrypted message, but he says he will not go to war until he has undeniable proof the message is real. At the Western Front headquarters, Conrad is told he is assigned back to London, and he walks out and tells one of his men there to follow him. Back at the estate, the same soldier approaches Shola and says Conrad sent him and his new name is Lancelot, and he seeks an audience with Arthur. Polly is then told by Orlando to increase their network to the White House, and that's when Shola tells him he has a guest. Orlando is then handed a note by his son and he gets upset when Conrad says he has sent Archie Reed in his place and tomorrow his dream of entering a battlefield will finally come to fruition. He leaves his father with a poem that starts saying bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed coughing like hags. Seems Conrad gets right into the thick of a battle as he hides in a trench and tries protecting his fellow man but fails. Captain Forrest then arrives and says that man had vital intelligence and he needs 6 volunteers to grab what he had, and Conrad is the first to take the offer. When night arrives, the 6 men and their captain crawl their way silently to the downed soldier. They all stop when a German team walks out and all the men there remain silent as a single bullet will lead to all their deaths. Everyone slowly drops their guns and take out their knives and hammers. It's a 7-on-7 fight and it begins. None can scream or make any noise as they'd all die and many are killed quite quickly, and Conrad gets his first kill and 2 Germans approach him. He fights them both at once and he slices them both up. Another comes and he's a big unit. Captain Forrest sees that his last man is about to die and fires his pistol, which causes the captain to die instantly. Flares are launched and Conrad is shot at by both sides until he finds cover. War is nothing like he imagined, and as he cries his eyes out he discovers the man from earlier is alive, and the man gives Conrad a hug and tells him to calm his breathing. He also tells Conrad he needs to finish the mission as he cannot move properly. But Conrad refuses to leave his man behind and holds him, but the Germans see this and begin shooting. The English provide cover and bullets fly all around him, yet he manages to continue running, but a bomb throws him inside the trenches and the man did not survive. When they ask for Conrad's name, he says it's Archie Reed, but one of the men there say he is lying. Conrad tries explaining himself, but the man thinks he's a German spy and shoots him dead. His family at home are devastated at the loss, and Orlando cries to a picture of his dead son. They bury him with the thousands of other bodies and his dad reads the poem Dulce et decorum est to his family, his king, and to hundreds of others attending his son's funeral. While all this happens, Nicholas is forced to step down from the throne and renounce his title. Polly then tells Orlando that Conrad had recovered the German ambassador's original handwritten telegram and is the concrete proof America needs to fight. The shepherd in the meantime is told the bad news by Eric that America is about to join the war, and their plan backfired. He then kills his training partner and tells Mata Hari to sort the problem out. But as some time passes, Orlando isn't doing too well. The loss of his son is hitting him quite hard, and he doesn't know how to cope with it. King George then arrives and tells him Russia has pulled out the war, the Germans' blockade is working, and America refuses to fight. The king then takes out a Medal of Honor in Conrad's name and leaves Orlando be. Polly gets him up and lectures him, saying don't let Conrad's sacrifice be in vain, and she too says her heart is broken. With that, he fixes himself up and gets ready for what's about to come. The others are happy to see him, and say the president's butler is feeding them information saying the president isn't himself, and keep speaking to his ambassador in London. With that, Orlando heads directly to the ambassador and requests a meeting. Mata Hari then walks out of the room, and she distracts Orlando with her scarf, then goes to stab him but misses. She is quickly stopped and Orlando makes her pass out. The ambassador then walks out and Orlando wants a meeting now. The ambassador says that Mata Hari filmed the president and her in secret and is blackmailing him with a tape. Orlando understands the situation and shows his tailor the scarf Mata Hari had. He quickly deduces the location of where it was made. The team immediately make their way to an empty cabin where they see 6 men guarding a lift. They need to somehow control the lift, and it seems Orlando has one crazy plan in mind. He flies his plane through the air and ties the yoke with a rope as he puts on his parachute. He waits until he's close enough, but the rope unties itself, causing Orlando to get stuck in the plane's wing. It plummets downwards and he cuts himself free and almost collides with the plane until he activates the parachute and then misses his landing target. He is hanging on by a thread, literally. He uses his knives to climb up the mountain, but the branch holding him snaps and he barely escapes. There's only one way to safety now, climbing the mountain. But as he's almost on the top, the ice bed beneath him crumbles and he uses the mountain goats to grab the cliff's edge. But one mountain goat sees him and headbutts him. Orlando grabs its horn and safely makes it on the mountain. He then sees DuPont being sworn at by the shepherd, who gives him a tape and says to show it to the world if the president joins the war. Orlando is then spotted by the guards and he locks the door to control the lift. But a gigantic man inside grabs him and he launches a flare. The 2 down below start killing off the troops and Polly uses a sniper at them. They retaliate though, and she gets pinned down until Shola intervenes and the duo manages to kill everyone on the ground. Orlando then gets into a fight with the brute, but wow is he tough. Orlando is kicked off the edge, but once again he hangs on for dear life. Shola then grabs the weight for the lift and Polly separates the line, which causes Shola to come flying up to kill the gigantic man. He lifts Orlando up as well, to which he calls Polly and confirms she has the tape. Orlando is annoyed at this war and wants to kill the shepherd. He and Shola kill all the men waiting for them outside in seconds. They then go into the building and are fired at. They run around and find cover, and the shepherd chucks the gun, and he already knows that it's the Duke of Oxford in his presence. The two adversaries begin firing rounds at each other, and Orlando fires the flare gun, and everyone there runs out of ammo. The shepherd then tells Orlando that they should end it like gentlemen, as manners maketh man. The shepherd reveals his face to be none other than Morton. Seems the entire time he was with Kitchener he was telling him to make the wrong moves and was actually the one to fire the missile that killed Kitchener. The two unsheathe their swords, and Shola sees the gun on Morton's sword and jumps in the way of the bullet. And here comes the duel. Both men have outstanding sword skills and have clearly mastered the art. They fight atop a table and go back and forth until Morton flips Orlando over. Orlando slices at the man's leg and is then kicked away. Morton tosses a grenade at Orlando, but he deflects it and lands outside the building. When Morton approaches, Orlando is forced to use the sword's case to defend himself. But he is quickly dragged to the edge and attempts to throw Morton off, but he is instead smacked to the ground, and now he's in trouble. A goat that Shepherd was mistreating suddenly stabs him, which causes Orlando to get the upper hand on Morton. He then uses his son's metal to cut the scarf and cause his enemy to fall down the cliff and instantly die. Orlando kisses his son's metal, and Shola seems to be alright as well. Later on, the butler that works for Orlando gives the president the tape. He is beyond happy and immediately declares war on Germany. England celebrates, and King George says that the victory belongs to Orlando and his beloved son. Seems the king's other cousins didn't have the same fate, and both lose their crowns. The following day, Orlando invites the king and his other friends to the Kingsman tailor shop. He wants to open an intelligence agency operating at the highest level of discretion. They agree, and their code names are from a game he used to play with his son, which goes by Arthur, Galahad, Lancelot, Benevere, Percival, and lastly, Merlin. With that, the movie ends and the Kingsman begins. Thanks for staying until the end. If you enjoyed the recap, make sure to smash the like button, and I'd love to hear what other movie franchise recaps you'd like to see, and I'll see you on the next one.